Welcome to all of you who are new to our series. This is our second series. I'm Erica Wall, and I am the director of the Berkshire Cultural Resource Center here at Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts in North Adams. And we are super excited to be able to bring you this series with Genevieve Gaignard. We had a really awesome surprise today that she actually came into her gallery space since we've gone into quarantine. Genevieve's been in Massachusetts working out of Wendell, and we have two buildings here. So she's in a building, not this building, but she's in the building next door to us. And she is going to be talking with you from her space, which she just actually moved into today. We're super excited about that. We had a lot of people, just like we did last week, come and join us. And we will have another session which will be the last of this series on Wednesday, the 27th. After that, I should say that it's not the last of the opportunities to actually hang out with Genevieve and talk with her. She is here with us in residence until the end of August, and she's going to culminate her residency here with an exhibition that we hope we're going to be able to open to the public. But if not, we will definitely share that virtually. And you have an opportunity to talk with her again each Wednesday at this time. There'll be different topics. A lot of what she'll be talking about is what she's working on here and what we're planning here in North Adams that's related to her exhibition. So again, I really welcome all of you and thank you for coming and being part of her residency. This is a really neat opportunity for us. Genevieve is putting together an amazing slideshow to kick us off. And I just want to say, if you were here last week, we really appreciate it, and we encourage all of you to continue to give us those questions, because that's why we're here. We wanted to make this as interactive and participatory as possible. I'm sure everybody's zoomed out and you've been to tons of webinars where you watch. We want to make sure that you're actually able to talk with us. So the way that it works, the way that it worked last week is we have our chat, and you can send us a question through there. And Veronica, who is here, I don't know if Veronica can wave, but anyway, Veronica, you can message Veronica and you can say, hey, Veronica, I've got a question, and Veronica will unmute you, and we invite you to either ask the question yourself or we will ask it for you. Genevieve is ready to go, so we're totally, there she is. So, hey, So Genevieve had some technical difficulties. Hopefully we worked through them, but we're just glad we're able to be together. So Genevieve, how are you doing?
What is up, everyone? I'm doing okay. I feel like really nervous, especially because I see like people came back for this. So maybe I did something right, or it was a train wreck and you guys want to see that again. But it's great to be back with you all. And, you know, I have a slideshow. I don't think it's as amazing as Erica built it up to. It's got some, you know, references of my influences and just kind of like how I started making work when I was in LA and kind of how that's evolved. But I see Yasmin in the house. Hey, girl, hey. I see Alexandra from the, Okay, sorry. You see, like, I have little reactions to everyone. You got rid of your backdrop. Try again. I'm just scrolling through to see faces. Okay. Thank you guys for showing up. Okay, so let me share with you this slide thing. Oh, you have not let me share. Can Erica?
Yeah, Veronica, can you get Genevieve in?
I see some of you are in your studios. I love that. It's funny because I'll be looking at a specific person, but you don't necessarily know that. And then I got the smile and I was like, oh, maybe they saw that I was looking at them. Let me try this again.
Are we good?
Yes.
It should be. Okay, cool. Oh, cool. Yeah.
Great. So I can't see as many people now, but I just wanted to kind of maybe recap a little bit and say that, you know, the last talk we kind of went over just me and my early kind of discovery of my practice, and or even just like making art. I don't even know if I could call it my practice really then. And so what I've put together here is kind of just like to show you how, you know, my practice was pretty photo heavy at Yale, but I'm kind of showing you that, you know, after not moving to LA and having maybe not access to facilities to, you know, print my work, or even just like places that I could go photograph inside someone's home. So this is a portrait taken in what is the train station? Union Station in LA? I don't know. Someone knows, and I can't see if you're nodding yes or not. But yeah, so this was shot there. And interestingly enough, I showed up like this, and I was walking around with a few friends who were helping me do the shoot. So also just to recap, I photograph with an assistant. I go out into the world with someone else. So I'm not shooting with a timer, although sometimes I've done that. I'm mostly out in the world with someone else. So having them kind of communicate back to me what they're seeing, so I can kind of adjust and see what I need to do. And then of course, kind of having something shot and then getting up, looking at the back of the camera and just being like, okay, this is what I'm looking at. And when I see this frame, you know, tell me to move my arm here, you know, stuff like that. I can go into that a little bit more if y'all have questions about it. But so back to this particular shoot in Union Station, if I'm calling it the right station, we were walking around with a tripod and everything. Some people were like, who are you? Oh my God, because I had this wild wig on. And I was like, I'm nobody. So I just kind of was walking around, but long story short, I ended up getting approached by the security there, because you're supposed to have some sort of permit to photograph in that space, which I did not have and I wasn't aware of, but it kind of was a reality check of kind of the scene in LA for access, I guess, to photograph certain places. So then I just like went downtown and hit the streets. And that was a little bit easier, although there was a lot of catcalling and whatnot, stopping traffic, and
always stopping traffic. We like that, Genevieve.
Just to give you a little bit of, I read through some of the questions, so if I don't touch on all of them, you'll have time to re-ask those, but I wanted to talk about how I kind of choose where I photograph, and maybe how I choose my costumes or my look. And really early on, like when I was just out in LA, I would just get into a look, and then I would drive around or ride around and see like where I could go. So it was really kind of hit or miss, and there's still a bit of that to my practice. Unless I have kind of scouted something ahead of time, I'm not as on the ball as it might appear from looking at my work. A lot of happy accidents. And this particular image, I remember a friend of mine from Yale who had also moved to Los Angeles, let me raid her closet. And then sadly, I continued to have all of these clothes in my studio in a bag to give back to her that I literally just gave back to her maybe like a month ago, or like before I left to come back to Massachusetts. So if people lend you stuff, be good at giving their stuff back.
That's good.
Is the moral of that story. So yeah, and then in this one, you know, I started to find, you know, the wig shops and everything. So that was really a cool experience for me being in LA. But this was the first time I ever had my hair braided. So I like found this dope chick that does braids and got to experience that, and didn't realize just like how heavy that much hair is like added onto your head. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'll get a groove. I'm kind of like
It's good.
Like I said, I feel nervous. I feel excited that you guys are here with me. So another thing is like I didn't have a studio when I first moved to LA, and so I was just making things out of, like, I guess you don't need a studio to make random stuff out of gum, or shoes out of gum, but meaning like I didn't have a big budget to put towards, or any budget really to put towards my art at the time. So using some of my already existing shoes and using those as the base to create from is kind of where things got started. There was a question, Erica, sorry, I'm gonna like put, that I didn't really know how to answer, but I wanted to start to address with that kind of the ideas of camp and kitsch, the aesthetic that my work lives in.
Do you remember that, or do you want me to read it out?
I think it was asking me if there were any Black references to kitsch or camp.
Exactly.
And I was thinking that I could be that. I also think that it's not necessarily, because I think I had referenced a film like Gummo, and feeling like I wanted my work to kind of live somewhere in between Gummo and like something Wes Anderson would make, which is kind of a weird mashup. Like those two things are almost opposite. But I don't think that even though those references are two white guys, I don't think that that means that how I translate what those things look like or what I grab necessarily is specific to white culture or Black culture. So it kind of just is kitsch, and whoever it's for, or whoever like resonates with it, I guess, is who it's for. Just using like a old what was that, like a terry robe like that grandma would wear, and some glitter, and just like, you know, wrecking my shoes. And I don't know if I had mentioned this to just you, Erica, in a previous conversation, but my first studio that I did end up having in LA was in the basement of this really like beautiful live work spaces, but the basement was not the best. And there were giant cockroaches like that would just randomly appear. And so these shoes are kind of a nod to that, while at the same time a nod to the movie Hairspray by John Waters.
Yeah, I do recall the cockroach story. Genevieve, you had started to use, because you showed us an image last week, so you were continuing with the shoes in your work, but this is not like the first time that you had done it. You were really just kind of continuing that when you got to LA. So it wasn't like a huge turn when we look at your practice.
That's a good, yeah. Thank you for saying that. So, so I had shown a presentation of like 13 pair of shoes that I had made over the course of being at Yale. Right. And then it was funny because there was a lot of like hype around the shoes, but no one really, I don't know, like I would just show up and wear them sometimes to places and events, but at the same time, and I think I touched on that a little bit last time, like if I would go to an opening, like these were the shoes like I would wear. Not this particular pair, but something like this. So I think it was just like, I'm going to stick to what I know. I'm moving to a new place. I'm just going to like, continue to make what feels, I think there's this pressure to kind of like constantly reinvent yourself. I put that on myself too, still, but I think if you're stuck, that idea of just starting with something that feels familiar, right. And it can be a different spin on it, Right. My mom would send me like care packages. So it was kind of like whatever she sent me, I had to figure out how to turn that into something.
That's interesting too, because a lot of what you do is collect things. And so it was really, I remember going to one of your talks and you saying that, but you can really see how there's a reflection of things that probably have come with you, but then what you found when you were in Los Angeles, which really kind of fits together nicely.
Yeah, or taking the stuff from home or wherever my mom was sending it and reacting to my surroundings. Right. Because I don't think I would have made a shoe this chic if I hadn't been in LA.
Right.
Thanks for smiling at that one, Yasmin. I can see you in this small list. Okay, so this is like one of my really early collages, and I made my early collage works that I made in LA. The first few I didn't even actually get real wallpaper. I like printed it off on an inkjet printer. So those things are probably horribly discolored at this point. But sorry to whoever bought those. And this one was actually, I had just found like this woman who sold vintage wallpaper. So I got some vintage wallpaper. I was also having this like freak out about these sexting selfies that I had sent out to this guy. And I was like, how can I reclaim this before this, I don't know, this is something that people will say, they'll be like, what if someone posts those on the internet? And I was like, I will post it on the internet first. Not really, but put it on or use it in my work. So that was like me like reclaiming it or whatever, if that makes sense. So you're going to see a little bit of that through these. And then just kind of touching on those things, like the themes of like the cat lady vibe, which is a little bit me, a little bit more than I might pretend to, own, but yeah. I'm showing you this early stuff too, to just show you like the materials were just kind of, some of it I was getting small amounts of wallpaper, but it was pricey for me to get the wallpaper at the time. It was like $18 to $20 a yard. So that felt expensive. So I was like, I have to like make one piece that will fit this much wallpaper. And then I would go to the 99-cent store and I recreated this shower like view. I remember going with one of my old classmates to the fabric district or the fashion district? I'm really not giving you guys
there's both.
Great terms.
Both. Yeah.
But there's like an area where they have just all the fabric on the streets. So I went there, and I think my friend was looking for something specific, but I just had picked like a remnant up off the ground and asked the guy how much it was. And he was just like, oh, you can have that scrap. So like I was kind of acquiring pieces for the work, even when I was out with my friends when they were working on their stuff.
Right.
This is a weird transition. Because I'm just basically wanted to just like show materials, like more so of the practice to kind of start. This coat evolved from this image. So this photograph was taken for a show in New York at Flag Arts Foundation. And this character just had this vibe that I kind of was like, no one would think that this woman could possibly be Black. So how could I like evolve her story or like give you a clue about her story that would reveal a side to her, because you're reading her one way, but so like I was like, if I used her coat and reveal, since you can't see the inside of her coat, then you reveal that she's got all these Black Panther patches. So she was like for the cause. And, you know, I just thought it was like a one way to like use materials to evolve the story, or bring like evolve the materials I'm using. Like this isn't a move I would typically make, and I'm, you know, it might be a while till I would do that again. But it's just to kind of say, like, how do you, like sometimes the photographs feel like I'm hitting the same note every time. So I want to like keep upping the ante, if you will.
Have you ever shown this by itself, like in a show, but by itself, like
the coat?
Yeah.
Yeah, the photograph was close by.
Okay.
Then you saw the coat. I found this Black Panther like plastic head, and it had like a little hook on it, so that ended up being the hook for the coat to.
Oh.
And then it was next to an installation of possibly that woman's home. So you saw the picture, but then you were kind of brought possibly into her home.
Because it seems like it could be either part of an installation, clearly part of photograph, but standalone. So I was curious how.
Yeah, it was presented as a standalone piece.
Mm-hmm.
So there she is again. And my studio manager also assists me in my photographs often. And she brought her dog along. And so this is Frida making an appearance in one of the photographs.
Hi, Frida.
Okay, so now I'm showing you some influencers influencing materials. I wanted to start off with Lorna Simpson as a reference to my collage work. Honestly, I never really was introduced to her work while I was at school, or I think it didn't start till I was getting more like finding my scene of people in LA, and like my Black community was growing, and me just shifting my lens to like only looking at artists of color. So to be introduced to her work and see someone who's using materials, and I might be like lying a little bit, not lying on purpose, but yes, her work probably came across my scope. I'm not saying like I was totally clueless, but there wasn't like, oh, that's an artist I want to study and, you know, work in that mode. Mm-hmm. So it was more of a, oh, this is someone that's using similar materials. So less that I'm influenced by her, but more that I'm in conversation with her in terms of like materials that I'm using. and now that I like feel like I have an understanding of how I kind of move with my materials and my kind of aesthetic, I look at her work as a way to push me out of my comfort zones. I feel like I get in a pattern of working, and so I'll reference her work to push myself further. Like there's a roughness to it, but it's so like she's so sure of what she's doing at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, sometimes there's that line of humor that also I feel like is a tool I use in my work. Maybe it's not spoken about as much with Lorna, but I feel like it makes me smile often. It's just nice to see her using imagery. Like, I'm like, oh, that's this, I'm looking through the same magazines, literally using the same images at times, and seeing how different one can respond to it. Here's another one of my works. Again, using the sexting selfies. I came across some old Playboy magazines, and this was, I believe, the first black centerfold, which I thought was amazing, and I wanted to incorporate that into a piece. And I actually felt kind of weird at first putting her on blast, like exposing her, although she, you know, she had posed for the image and whatnot, but taking her out of the magazine, you're not kind of alone in your space with it. It's out there, it's opened, it's revealed. So I made a point to kind of put myself in there in that similar way to kind of balance that, like, I don't know, that feeling of, you know, putting yourself out there.
Mm-hmm.
Again, just showing some of the early works and how they've I think I started to really mess up the background, like mess with the actual wallpaper itself as another layer to it. It was almost a direct response to the passing of my niece. She passed away in a house fire. And while I was, you know, living in LA and processing this, it seemed to be the best way for me to like process it, like putting that in the work.
Right.
It was also a point that I wanted to like also incorporate her in the work by using roses. Her middle name was Rose. So that became this kind of thing that became part of my language in my work. Mm-hmm. And it's this collage specifically, I think I was really, it's interesting to like look back at stuff and kind of think of maybe the headspace you were in or what you were going through, which my work kind of easily can do that for me.
Yeah.
Again, so that you know, I kind of got curious with the materials or the imagery from the Playboy magazines and started to also use the Vargas girls, which were an image that would show up in each issue. But also, so often like referring to using the white girl kind of sprawled out here as, you know, this is kind of what we're told we're supposed to like desire or want to be like or emulate. But then every once in a while there would be a Black Vargas girl. So I'm more honoring her opposed to being like, we don't necessarily want to look like this. We want to look like this.
Right.
Or we want to just celebrate this.
Right.
Some of the materials also that I'm just like looking at in this one, again, the staining is there, but it's a lot more faint. I'm also using kind of everyday objects like stickers that brings that level of, I don't know, kitsch back to the work. So it's this kind of everyday thing that I'm trying to elevate by putting it in this context. But when I look at this one, it also makes me think of like a girl's bedroom when she, you know, you might just put stickers or draw on your wall. Here's another influence, Betty Saar. It's funny, like I purposely found influences that I would not typically like reference it off the top of my head of people that I'm influenced by, but I wanted to pull works that I think I'm more in conversation with. So it's bringing the story further. Both these artists are still alive and well and making work and relevant work. I'm just, I feel like it's nice to be, like have a reference that there's someone you're in conversation with opposed to a direct, I don't know, copy of, I guess. Mm-hmm. Where I think so many artists are often, and young artists were kind of discouraged because we're like, oh, such and such did that. That reminds me of this person. And I think it's, if you can find that point where yes, there will be people that maybe you fall in that category of really kind of your work mimics or looks very similar. Where can you make those shifts to kind of be more in conversation with the person opposed to directly like a copy almost of their work?
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Again, like the bird cages I use a lot in my work as well. But I think there's just totally different aesthetics. So you can have like the same materials, but a different way of bringing them to your vision. I also wanted to throw this two-sided installation in the mix, just in case that someone had questions about how I approach my installations. For this particular show, the installation was pretty much the last thing to get figured out, although it was like kind of the heartbeat of the show. And I don't know if I just felt confident that I could find everything. This show happened to be in LA. I was really, you know, connected to the sources that I get a lot of my stuff. And I had my team that, you know, helps me find things or go pick things up. I remember FaceTiming in a thrift store with one of my friends while I was installing the show and just like being like, what is that dog behind you? Like he wasn't going to show me that, but I was, what was that thing in the corner? And I'd be like, no, tilt the camera down. You know how it is when you're FaceTiming someone. And so that's kind of how this installation evolved. I mean, the base was figuring out the wallpaper and then everything else kind of fell into place. Mm-hmm. So this is the other side of that first image. So you were able to kind of see the interior of a stereotypical white family's home and then a stereotypical or maybe not so stereotypical Black family's home.
I think my parents had those wing chairs. I do.
Thank you for those. And then I just ended on this, a few more photographs. This was, this I wanted to add in because I had the collages kind of going in my studio. And at first for this show, I wasn't going to do any photographs. And then I decided, you know, I was kind of getting a little, just kicked back from a little bit at the gallery, a little bit from just people that know my practice and were just kind of urging me to reconsider and having some photographs. And I'm just in collage mode right now. So it was a little harder to like get myself to go there. But when I finally realized that did make sense. And there was maybe a missing piece to the big picture of the show. I decided to, before I started to glue images onto the panels that I had already wallpapered for the collage works, that I would use those wallpapers or those panels as backdrops for these headshots. And these are the ladybirds. So the show was titled, "I'm Sorry I Never Told You That You're Beautiful." And so I think having that element of having me pictured in the work or in the story made more sense at the end. I guess I added that one too.
I think that one's important.
And don't forget, sell to Black collectors. I think I threw that in there just to kind of show you that maybe I wasn't really, like early on, I was inching at something, and I'm finally at a point where I'm just gonna like get to the point, if you will, with my work, you know, when it makes sense, when it can work. So that's kind of what I've put together for you guys.
I think there's a lot for us. I think there'll be a lot of questions. One of the things that interests me when you talk about your work, you talk a lot about process, and you know, you reference your team, Erin, your studio manager, all of these things and how it makes it work. And I'm wondering, to make all of this happen, do you have a network, a support system, other artists who've helped you, you know, continue to help you? I'm sure there are even people here, like say, like Evan Whale. Would you say that was a person?
Is Evan here?
Hey, Evan!
Evan!
Hey, Erica.
Surprise! Hi, Evan!
I was like, is he even here?
Yeah, Evan helped us out. We plotted this, and he took on a different alias. Thank you, Evan.
You're
hilarious. Thank you.
How's it going, Jen?
Evan is definitely, he's a rock star. We went to Yale together. We were in the photo program together. Shout out. And Evan was actually one of my classmates that moved back to LA. He was already living there prior. So he was helpful in many ways, in the sense of like, I remember actually him driving me around, like the first time I drove like into downtown LA, and there was like some song you insisted on putting on the radio.
Oh, it was Randy Newman's "I Love LA," of course.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like,
that's so great.
But it was pretty magical, like, you know, the lights on the buildings. I was just like, oh, okay, this makes sense. It's like a movie. And, you know, Evan is, he's such a, like, I feel like we joke a lot so much.
We do. And we've always had like a sibling dynamic, I feel like, in grad school especially.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's fun. It's fun. No, I had a lot of fun showing you LA for it was your first trip to LA, right? That time we went?
Maybe that's when we were there for the thesis show.
Yeah. That was really fun.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that was the show that you referenced last week. So Evan was in that show that went there. And so that was great. So you already had somebody that was actually going to be there permanently to kind of help you through all of that.
Yeah, a few of us moved out there, so it was cool. Like I didn't feel like I was totally alone. But even now, like, you know, I think the first year or so that I like moved there, I reached out to Evan a lot, and then we kind of drifted apart. And then it's like funny with LA, like you would bump into each other at an opening, or you know, like it's not random, but it is. And then it's like, oh, wait, great. We're like reconnecting. Like, let's do something or let's hang out. And Evan knows like all the best spots to like get food. And he's always like showing me like the next hot spot. And always asks me like what drink I want. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know any, like, I don't have a developed palate in that sense. So I would just like, you order something, and then I'd take a sip and I'd be like, okay, I'm not talking for a minute.
Yeah, we had some fun.
So I think it's interesting because we invited Evan because we thought, you know, having both been there at that time in transition. Evan, are you from the East Coast originally too?
Yeah, I'm from DC originally.
Okay.
And I didn't move back to LA immediately. I was in New York for 2 years after grad school, but I was back and forth. But,
okay.
But yeah, then I moved back to LA in late 2016, and that's when we really started to reconnect here in LA.
Yeah. If we talk about practice, is there a certain way that you feel like the two of you, obviously I think that just, you know, collegial support system, but is there any way when you think about, you know, again, coming back to that question, artists and how they help each other, just in terms of practice, were there particular things that you were able to support each other in certain ways with your practice?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for Genevieve, but I always felt like it was so nice to see a friendly face from another time. Well, not from who knew me like back in grad school and at any of like shows that we had, you know, when I would go to her shows and she would go to mine, and that was always really important. And we had that, I remember that really funny dinner we went to too at the Diane. Yeah.
No name drop.
I don't know. It's just, yeah, we just, it's nice to be able to just like joke around and have fun with, you know, someone in the art world who's known you for so long, you know.
I think we also have each other as a reference to, you know, if say, you know, a show, if we've showed at a certain place, like what were some of the challenges, what were some of the things you know, could
totally
be aware of. I mean, we had both worked with this particular person, so we kind of had already known how to like, you know, manage that. But it's just nice to have someone to bounce ideas off, and Evan has a really, really good eye. So I feel like I trust him. And I don't have a big group of people that I feel like that about, so.
Totally, me too.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we've had some really fun studio visits too.
Yeah, and I've also, well, Aaron usually, well, I don't know if it's Aaron or if it's me, but will call Evan and usually would like no time to be like, hey, can you photograph some work for me? Because that's not my forte, and he's at it. And he just, you know, has documented my work to show it in its best way, because you can't always get to the work in person.
Right.
Especially now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Both being photographers, I'm sure, and also doing other things. Is there something about each other's work that you admire, or specifically like respect, or?
Don't put him on the spot like that.
Well,
okay, you go first.
Oh, okay. Well, I've always admired, I've seen Genevieve's work develop from, I guess, the start of grad school to now, and it's really amazing to see her so seamlessly transition from photography to like video. I don't know if that question got through the screener, but that pink booty video that you made in grad school, I still think about that. It's amazing.
Yeah,
it's
talk to us about that, Genevieve.
You're like, I still think about that.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I don't know. It was always impressive how you came in with photo, and then you were able just to so easily make these sculptures and make these other media so effortlessly, and it seems so natural, and with great confidence too. And I think that's always been really something I've admired about your work.
Thanks, man. I also really admire the work you're doing. It has a really it actually feels really different than what you did at school to me.
Yeah, big time.
And it just showed you're such a detail oriented person that it's you're not just focused on the image you've created. It's the full presentation, down to the framing. You're also, your mark making and gestures on the photograph, it brings it beyond photography, which also I feel is a hard thing to do, and you're doing that. So
I think we're both doing it. It's great, to be on that edge of everything.
I just love this love. It's so great. I think it was really important for us to invite Evan and to think about, I think just in general with artists, that support system, other artists who are experiencing the same ways, but to, really reiterate that everybody's got a different path, and how do you support that? But I wonder if there are, and I put this out, to all artists too, I think, but with the two of you and anyone listening, you've talked about, I think you just referenced, your art changes when you leave your MFA program, or you may diverge a different way or do something even with more vigor after you've moved on. And how is it to manage those different mediums? And because you've talked, Genevieve, a little bit, I think a little reference, certain people or patrons or collectors or viewers start to associate you with maybe something that you've done or you became a little bit more recognized for, but you don't want to be necessarily pigeonholed into that, and just managing different things and wanting to explore things, but in this way, without people having certain expectations and helping them to transition through what you're evolving into. So for both of you, I pose that question for the group, but what do you think?
I mean, it was nice to hear Evan say that I so seamlessly transitioned between these different mediums. Because I don't know if I was thinking about that, but it was more just, how do I expand on the story? And I feel I could only say so much with the photograph. And I can keep saying that until the message gets through, and I think it adds another layer to it. And but I don't have any rules for myself in that sense. I think when I was at school with Evan and, our classmates, we were easily influenced by seeing someone, taking a risk in a certain way. So it made it a little easier sometimes to try something because you saw someone else doing it. And so maybe that was part of me being able to have that more seamless transition. But even I was thinking about the work I made for Freeze L.A., and that kind of incorporated mostly collage works. I did take 2 photographs, again, just to kind of keep my people that know me for my photographs in the mix, and I don't even necessarily mean so there's something for them to buy. It's more just if you know my whole story, that would be a visual clue. But I remember that being the most recently, like the hardest show for me to produce, and feeling like that first feeling of like, I have writer's block, however that translates for artists. And I don't know if you have this. I feel like, Evan, you're pretty like, I don't know, you're way more organized, and you have like almost like, I don't know like really what your flow is in the studio so much, but I remember just thinking like, I have this deadline and I have no idea where this is going. And Erin, my studio manager, can also attest to that. So like just being like, okay, well, she kind of knows me enough to not, she knows when to give me the pressure and when to just like let it go. But yeah, I had some serious nights that I was worrying like, how do you show up? You have this opportunity, and whether it's, you know, a show in a gallery or a group show or anything, and like you're like, this is my moment to show up and present myself, you're always gonna like have those moments that you're just like, how do I do it?
I want to start to get, it looks like we have some questions. So I'm going to, it looks like the first question is from Yasmin about the work selling to Black collectors. And a couple of people we will share Evan's website. A couple people are interested. We'll definitely do that. But yeah, so let's open it up to Yasmin. Hi.
Hi. Do you want me to unmute? Oh,
you're set. You're all good.
Okay. So I was curious, like, what were the responses? Like, were there responses to that surprised you? Like, what has been the reaction to it, you know?
Oh, to the sell to Black collectors? Yeah. It's been kind of a range of responses. Some super clueless people being like, oh, is that a thing? Is that a problem? And, you know, and all at this, I mean, I kind of joke about that, but I also, you know, if you're in a bubble, like you just aren't aware of that. And so, yeah, it is an issue. But then I had people get really upset with me and say, you know, you have no idea what you're talking about. You're worsening the problem by saying something like this. And that was like someone that, you know, slid into my DMs, and I was just like, oh my God, I'm an asshole. Like I felt like I'm the problem, you know, like I did that for a minute. But again, like having that team of people, like I ran it by the people I trust before I like, you know, I had the idea, didn't really know what it was going to look like. I think that was one of the things that I was like, oh yeah, that's one that I know how it's going to work, because I know what it's going to say, and it's going to hopefully fit in this triangle, and I'll figure out the other stuff when I get to it. But like the reaction was more positive than negative, but at the same time, it was put out there more as a question, even though it's a statement. You know, like what kinds of reactions or what kinds of questions are going to come from that? It's almost just to start the conversation behind all that. If that.
Yes.
Oh, you're still muted.
That good, Yasmin?
You're muted.
Good. Oh yeah, Yasmin's okay. I hate we muted Yasmin back. Did you want to?
Oh yeah, sorry. I muted myself at first because it was because there's a hospital here and it's like super loud. But I just wanted to say that like I love the boldness of it. You know, I know it's like we don't always see work that's like so direct and like that, and you know, and I feel like it's like always a risk, and you have this beautiful range of like, you know, very nuanced, you know, things that you're communicating, and then this very like bold and direct thing, which I know is going to, you know, would probably get like this wide range of responses, and it's like with certain messaging it's warranted, and I feel like that one like definitely was. So anyways, I'm glad you did that.
What else?
Thank you, Yasmin. Let's see. I have other questions that people had submitted, but we'll open it up to, because I'm not sure if everyone is here. Are there any other questions, Veronica, that are coming through? I'm gonna, do we have any other questions?
No, not at the moment.
So I have a question about, just interested in how you actually take the portraits. You had alluded to, you have an assistant, so they're not necessarily self-portraits. You actually have someone take your photographs.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, sort of.
Yes.
So I'm shooting on a tripod. So what happens is, I'm out with someone assisting me. Sometimes it's Erin, sometimes it's someone else. And I basically photograph them first. And I don't give them like a whole lot of direction because I don't really know what I'm going to do once I'm in front of the frame. I just kind of build the frame. So then I can kind of play within that framing. And I'm quite vocal. Like I will say, what does it look like if I'm shifted this way opposed to this way? Because I want to hear what they're seeing, basically, mm-hmm. when they're looking at the camera. And that gives me the freedom to kind of be in that space of not knowing as the model what I'm actually trying to get. And so, and I'm filtering whatever's kind of going around me as well, or the elements, depending on like where it's being shot. It could be cold, it could be crazy hot, there could be bugs, whatever.
Right.
And then I kind of just get to a point where I'm like, okay, stop. I'm going to come out of the frame and look through, and I'll look through, and I'll, that'll help me figure out like if I'm making the same expression all the time. I might say, oh, well, see, you didn't notice this, but when I look at this, it looks like you can't see my leg, or it looks like you can't, like my limb is cut or something like that, So it's almost like teaching whoever's helping me, like, see how I see in a way. If that makes sense.
I love that. Yeah.
So there's a little bit of control that I give up to be in the photograph. Mm-hmm. But there's ways that I can, adjust that as I'm shooting. But the same would be the case if I had a timer. I would have to I wouldn't have that person saying, what do you see, to kind of help guide me a little bit. Mm-hmm. The only difference, I guess.
I'm always wondering what's going through your mind when you have certain expressions on your face. Like, it's just it's so amazing. It really creates more than just an image for me, because when you put it in context, you wonder what else is going on, as though it were a moving image.
I'm gonna expand on that a little bit. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just to give you a sense of what, like a lot of times I don't like going out and taking the photographs also. And I might do an entire shoot. I might not look at those images based on my timeline for like a few days, a week, until I've got Erin saying, did you edit? Did you pick something? Or she'll be like, that was a great shoot. And I'm like, was it? Like, I can't separate myself from it in the sense of like, whatever vulnerable feeling I'm having or whatever in that moment. And then other times I'll be like, yeah, I think we must have got it in there somewhere, but I still don't always want to see what we were doing. Like, right. I want the space in between there. And then there'll be like the part where I'm sitting down with my editor, and you know, we're getting the picture just so, and the print is created, and then I'm like, oh, there is that other person that really isn't me even anymore. Even though it's all like connected to my story, like I can just appreciate like the photograph once it's physically made.
Yeah.
You know? I see some nodding, so people are into that.
I'm going to keep throwing out questions that I got from folks ahead of time. And if anyone has any other questions, feel free to, you could send me a message in the chat or send Veronica. Same person that asked about how you actually take the photos is interested in how specifically it's been for you working in quarantine and isolation since all of this has gone down.
Yeah, that's a question that comes up a lot. And I honestly, I'm like, this is a thing that's happening, but it doesn't, I don't know if it's drastically affecting me in an obvious way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm maybe more stressed, or, you know, my sleep is off, or, you know, I'm over analyzing any sort of feeling in my body that I'm like, oh, am I sick, or am I this, or am I that, you know? But when I'm making my work, I'm kind of in my own space. And whether I'm physically making something, I'm like gathering information, I'm watching the latest thing on Netflix. Like I'm just processing and like filtering all of the things that everyone else is kind of filtering through.
Right.
And then that will somehow filter out into the art.
I was thinking, so the same person was interested in how you've incorporated old vintage luggage, Samsonite, and sculpture. But I'm going to flea markets in LA specifically. But how has that changed when you can't go out and do all of that in the same way? Has it just been like a lot of online searching, or has that impacted your practice?
Yeah, a little bit. But I do, like, I think early on I used to do more of the vintage shopping and thrifting, like physically going places. But I've gotten more tuned into like what specific things I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the shops that I go to have online, you know, or they have Instagram, so they post a lot of the stuff in the store online. So I've made purchases that way. I spend a lot of time just scrolling on Etsy and eBay. So and I do that prior to this. So it's not too drastically different. You know, you might have to wait longer to get something, but
right.
But the luggage specifically, as pertaining to like the new body of work that I did for Freeze, the luggage came about as like kind of a new like extension of the hand mirrors. So how do you take something and not really do anything to it, but give it meaning? Is very kind of conceptual kind of approach to art making. So, and that's not how all of my art is, but I think that is one part of how I work. So in that struggle, I talked about, you know, I was having a really hard time figuring out what that block was. When I think back, I was starting to see a therapist, and I think I was just kind of like, maybe just talking through stuff that was getting me like in my head or whatever. So I was struggling, but I had this idea about having a representation of the baggage we carry. And so that's really what I see luggage in thrift shops on the side of the road, you know, like it's everywhere. So it wasn't like specific to a specific brand. It just was, you know, it was fun looking for you know, the different sets to see, you know, some things were very pristine and some things had lived a life. And so all of that is held in the objects and just adds to the story. The suitcases kind of evolved in my studio to become these floating shelves that were then surfaces that I could add objects onto to kind of hone in a specific meaning for each set. But that's kind of the thought process behind creating those.
We have another question from Brianna, and can we unmute Brianna, because it's a pretty involved question. It's a really good one, but it's really long. So
sorry about that.
Hi, Brianna. No, it's a great question. I don't want to butcher it. How are you?
I'm doing good. Hi. Thank you, Genevieve, for coming to my alma mater. I'm an alumni and an artist.
Oh, really?
So I'm very interested in performativity in your work, the act of creating a portrait as a performance in itself and an installation and the characters. And I looked up on your Vimeo, you have all these lip sync videos of you and your characters. And I'm curious to know, have you ever thought of performance or performance as an extension of your work? Mm-hmm. Have you thought of like showing up to one of your installations as one of your characters, or done like a show as one of your characters, and like what does performance mean as a part of your practice?
Yeah, great question, and something that has been asked of me in the past. It's funny, like I do have those urges to maybe bring it that much further, but at the end of the day, I have this pretty intense stage fright. So I think that's what kind of is what gets in the way of me wanting to take the photographs. And, you know, in a lot of ways, I feel like I am showing up as a character to my shows. I feel like pretty vulnerable right now. Like I'm not, you know, I feel like, you know, I'm stumbling on things. I'm trying to get my thoughts right, but it's fine because like I want you guys to like see the realness of it. But if I'm like showing up at a show, I'm showing up as artist, you know, and that's not like saying I'm not real, but I'm like, I kind of put myself in like a certain mindset to just kind of present, talk about the work, and help people through that. But I think if I showed up, you know, some of those videos were made with some friends back in the town that I live in, and like those ones, I think I let myself be a little bit more, I don't know, like out there, because I want the people that are performing with me to be out there, like let go a little bit. So it's like I have to, I allow myself to show up in a certain way to make those things happen, but not so much. Yeah, I have a few ideas in my head of projects that I would love to be a thing, but it would involve me really just not caring at all about what people thought, or, you know, I have this jukebox in my studio, and it could be a pretty dope performance piece. But yeah, if that ever happens, we'll see.
Cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brianna. You know, Genevieve, I think a lot of people who are here to listen about your practice are also wondering how you navigate and negotiate showing exhibitions. We talked a little bit, I think, about this on one of your other sessions, and just relationship to your gallery. And would you mind speaking a little bit to how your gallery responded to, you know, like switching mediums, and did they trust you with that? Did that transition deter you anyway? Make you second guess? Like how?
I mean, my thesis, like right out the gate, was not really a traditional photo show. So I don't think anyone had too many like expectations, but there's definitely been works that I've either explained because I see it in my head and I'm like, it's gonna work, but I can't really, you know, it's hard to get that across. That I think have been an issue possibly for the gallery, but or just no one's telling me no, you can't do that, but maybe things are priced a little lower to just, you know, and that maybe shows that they're not really sure if people are going to be into it or something. You know, I kind of just navigate in that wave of like, I have to get this out. Whether it works every time, that's not really my worry. Like whether, because I feel like each show or body of work that I do, I'm going to learn like where to go next based on the feedback, the conversations I have. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think, you know, all of this, we've talked a lot about your journey and how that does not in any way dictate how another artist's journey would be. But it's all this information, all these things that you think you know, or that you don't know, or you just don't know what you don't know. And a lot of it is negotiating space. And when you do land the representation that you want or thought you want or think you want, that it still requires something beyond that. I wonder if, I think we're still getting in some questions, but I wonder if the people that are here, I'm curious if anybody wants to share or tell us where you first saw Genevieve's work or what drew you to her work or your interest in.
Or what are you working on that you want to share?
Yeah, exactly. Anybody?
No,
Genevieve can talk for days.
I could talk for days.
Just kidding.
No. Oh, someone's got a question. We got someone in Santa Barbara.
Hi, everybody. We're dialing in from the Museum of Contemporary Art, Santa Barbara. And we have an install shot of Genevieve's exhibition, which is on here right now. It was open to the public for a week before we had to close our doors. So we're trying to, I don't know, release it into the ether.
Yeah, we love that. Thank you.
But it's interesting, I first saw Genevieve's work a couple of years ago online, I think maybe on Instagram, and started following her, and soon after happened to be spending the day in LA and was able to set up a studio visit. But I sort of harbored this fangirl crush on Genevieve and on her work for a long time, and you know, things were brewing, and it's been an honor to work with her. We were really lucky to have Genevieve and Aaron in Santa Barbara for 10 days almost, or for a while, installing the exhibition. But yeah, it was really one of those right time, right place, kismet kind of things. And just when you get to work with artists who you feel like you really resonate with them personally and their practice, it's just, it's that like goosebump, everything. I mean, when you were here, Genevieve, it felt like we'd known each other forever. So.
And we when we first had that studio visit, was like a year or two that had gone by till you circled back. You know, obviously you were probably planning and scheming, but I was just like, oh, I guess that wasn't.
I know. Institutional hiccup.
Don't be discouraged if you have a studio visit and you never hear from them.
Someone's hiding in the wings, stalking you from afar. You just don't know it.
Awesome. That is so great. I could definitely relate to that, Alexandra. And I think it is amazing. We so thank you for coming in on this. And just that background, I was like, oh my God, this is so great.
This one figured it out.
It's
disappearing though, so.
Anyone else want to share? Somebody said that they saw your work at the Houston Center for Photography. That was the first place they had seen it.
Oh, cool. Yep, I've been to Houston. Lou, you got nothing to say?
Hi. I'm Brianna. Like I said, I'm an alumna of MCLA, and I'm a performing dance person. And at the time I was at MCLA, I randomly had the crazy chance of having my work shown at Mass MoCA in Nick Cave's exhibit. And since then, I've been like kind of the opposite of you, really afraid of documenting my practice and like putting things onto paper, because I am so drawn to the ephemera of performance and the idea of like, I can just perform one day and like nobody can like trace it. So I'm on Instagram and I've been documenting and doing a creative project each day on my Instagram in celebration of my 25th birthday. So if anybody wants to follow me on Instagram, I've been doing little installations and little performances and stuff. So want to share that.
Cool.
Share your Instagram in the chat.
Oh, cool.
I heard you call out somebody's name, Genevieve.
Oh yeah, Lou's over here just in the background. Hey, no questions? I feel like you always send me stuff, and I'm curious, did we see each other in Houston? I don't remember how we met.
Yeah, we met at HCP, and it was kind of interesting because it was the In Passing show. And I think I just read a little blurb about the show, and I was kind of intrigued. And I walked in, and instead of reading the whole write-up at the beginning of it, I just sort of started walking around. I was just thinking, wow, this is really amazing. Like, there's this whole thing about representation, self-representation, and the whole sense of persona that came across. And I was just really, really struck by it. So I came to the talk that you did, and it was really interesting because the talk was about intersectionality. It wasn't even just kind of like, okay, this is what the show is.
Right.
And we had a chance to talk for about a half second, something like that. But, you know, I was just struck by the way that your images communicate so strongly. You know, there's so much about it that's about the subtext as opposed to the surface that I think is really, really interesting, really compelling. So I'm curious because some people will have a similar experience to you, and then some people will, I had a show at the California African American Museum, and some reactions were, who is this white woman, first of all? Yeah, right. Yep, that's part of my story. But then I think that was like that initial just walking in without reading the writing or whatever. But it's interesting how it can kind of have a first reaction, and then you maybe learn a bit more, and then you have this whole new reaction to it. And it was a space that I could go into and people wouldn't read me as the artist. And I could kind of overhear people's reactions, and they have gallery guides there. So like you could hear them also, telling the story, but it's just interesting I don't know if you knew it was me in all the pictures. I don't know how, some people don't even make that connection. Oh,
he's muted. Unmute. There he is.
Okay. Yeah, no, it didn't take long. I would say that. But, there were a couple of, like the first couple, I sort of looked at it and went, oh, wait a second, this is the same person.
Yeah.
The whole thing about what I thought was really interesting about it was the whole idea that I think in a sense it was about the performance, the drag of who you are, you know? And I forget, there's like a RuPaul quote, I think it was something about we're born naked and the rest is drag. And I thought, you know, that is like so extraordinary. And so it's not like just, it's not just gender, but it's race as performance, as, you know, it's like this thing that's constructed. And so I thought it was really, really compelling that it was like, I can get the whole thing about who's this white woman, but at the same time, it's kind of like, well, but that's the point, you know? Yeah. So, yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Lou.
Thanks, Lou. We have another person that saw your work. George saw your work at the Art Institute of Chicago.
Oh.
Was that a while ago? More recent?
I think there's a work in their permanent collection.
Amazing. Love that.
Cool.
I have a tendency to do this. Like, are you at a point now where, like if I see an artist's work that I really like at an institution, I remember, I think I was in, actually, I think I was in Denver and I saw a work by, I can't forget, but you know, you get so excited, and I don't know, I did something on Instagram about it, and that artist was like, oh my gosh, I totally forgotten I had that work there. Dingle, that too. And I thought to myself, I was like, darn, that's amazing to read. But you know, these ideas of how exciting it must be to have your work at certain institutions or to have your show at a certain place. And do you ever find yourself like just kind of reflecting on that or thinking about that, or certain places that you even wanted to have your work shown, or now at this point in your career?
I mean, yeah, it's always kind of jarring and exciting. So first I'll be like, where did they see that picture? And then I'll be like, Aaron, where is that picture? You know, like this kind of idea of like keeping track of where your things live in the world, you know, is part of it. So you have that reference, but it's exciting to just, you know, not know people that reach out via Instagram and just say that the work, you know, got to them or affected them in some way. And it's little things like that just are like helpful reminders that the work is doing the work, and that it, you know, that I can keep continuing. It's still relevant. Where sometimes I just feel like we're in our spaces as artists and you're just like hoping that it's getting through to people.
Right.
That's why I feel like I feel nervous, even though like I know, or I just feel like there's a lot of familiar faces here, whether I know you or if I've seen you on Instagram or, you know, and there's some artists in the space. Like I'm just like, I'm going into people's like backgrounds. We got Michelle and some paintings in the background. Loving that. I'm like, we're getting to the end, and I want to get these comments in. Let's see, Perla, I saw Genevieve at Underground Museum in LA. Our class had a field trip to LA, and that was one of our stops. That's where I met you. That's crazy. That's awesome. Yeah, the Underground Museum they called me and they were like, so can you do that wallpaper thing you do? And I was like, the collage work? And they're like, well, like, you know, like the whole wall of the bathroom would be great. And I was just like, I've never done that before. And so I worked with my wallpaper installers. They installed the wallpaper, and then I just brought in all my cutouts and just literally started gluing on the wall and staining it with coffee and I will never do that again.
That was one of my favorite spaces ever.
Peace.
I love that. I love what you did there.
The cool thing about having your work in the bathroom of a museum is like, you're kind of like, you're in every show.
That's right. It is, isn't it? It's one of the more beautiful, the Underground Museum is so unique anyway, but it is one of the more beautiful full bathrooms, people, right? There's like a bathtub and shower. And
yeah, so it used to be the studio. So then, like, I think they had their live workspace.
Right.
So
yeah.
That's why it's like a functioning bathroom. But the funny thing is, people will go in there and line up, realize that there's, you know, artwork in there. So the line builds up, and it's a mix of people waiting to see the work and a line of people waiting to use the bathroom. So they're just thinking, like, why is this taking so long? And you know, it kind of becomes a problem during openings, you know.
Everybody's grouped in there taking selfies. Yeah. I was probably one of them. We are a minute before the end of this session. Any last questions anyone has or comments that they want to share?
Yeah, I was going to jump in real quick. I'm going to unmute Taryn.
Okay, great.
Oh, wow. I didn't think I would actually manage to get on because we're about to close out. But anyway, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your work. I was here last week. I'll be a little bit more transparent. I'm a Black feminist theorist, and I'm actually here collecting research because I found your work incredibly compelling. I work on affect or feeling and Black domesticity. And I first encountered your piece 3104 from a mentor of mine, and I gave a paper at it at a conference about 3 years ago. And as as academic conferences are really weird, and it's a very, you get up, you read a paper, people respond to you publicly, and I got yelled at for reading your work as Black by a white literary theorist. And yes, and I mean, I do very kind of strange work. I mean, it can go into longer things. I'm not unfamiliar with getting yelled at by people for what I'm doing, but it was a moment that piqued interest, and I actually wanted to work some of what I was doing in 3104 into my diss, and it didn't happen. But right now I'm working on an article, and so that's why I'm glad you answered early on in the piece the thing about cats, because when I was doing a reading of your work, I was like, everything makes sense, but these cats are everywhere. It doesn't make any sense to me. Just don't answer the question, because I'm not asking you to give your meaning to your work.
About cats?
Yeah, it's like, oh my God, there's so many cats. And I did eventually see your work in person, the Flag Art Foundation in New York a couple of years ago. And I was super stoked earlier when you brought up the Black Panther fur coat. That was one of my favorite parts of that installation. And one of the things you didn't say is that there was music in that installation that was really compelling. It was just so immersive. I spent like probably way too long. People there thought I was creepy. I was in the room for like 2 hours just looking at every minute detail just because I was super into it.
For that person, you.
Yeah. I'm totally. So yeah, I'm just really a fan of your work, but also really curious about the kind of everyday aesthetics you're playing with and the messages you're sending, either known or unknown, that resonate with the viewer. And also kind of the history and temporality of what you're doing. It seems like these spaces are kind of domestic, but out of time. They seem historical. And so anyway, I found it compelling.
Thank you. And we should connect, and I can just message you and we can chat about this.
Yeah, of course. Just wanted to say hi.
Thanks, Taryn. And there's some people that are interested too in what you're working on. I think if you share your Instagram or something, they'd love to know more about your work. Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course.
I think this is a wonderful place to wrap it up. We're going to be here again next week. We have such a wonderful opportunity to spend this time with Genevieve and get to see all of you again and continue and resume the conversation. I want to thank all of you for coming and attending again. And I definitely, obviously, want to thank Evan Whale for joining us and surprising Genevieve in an awesome way. I want to thank Aaron Thompson, and I want to thank Veronica Preciado, and last but not least, we want to thank Genevieve Gaignard for helping us out and being here with us. Clap it out. Let's all clap it out.
Question about LA art scene. That's kind of the next Everything about that, but
I don't know. I think I plugged it into the speaker because I couldn't find the cube.
Uh-oh. Someone talking. That's okay. We will do this next Wednesday, 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time till 6:30. We look forward to seeing all of you. Thank you all for joining us. Send us your questions, register again. And we appreciate you. Stay well, stay safe, everyone. We'll see you next week.